to do.
All right, I want to go back to the Congress right now. Some Senate Democrats are speaking out against the nomination of Senator Jeff Sessions to become the Attorney General of the United States. There's Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut. Let's listen in.
For civil rights and liberties, a zealous advocate and legal conscience for the nation in protecting those rights and liberties. Senator Sessions said that he would follow the law, but the Attorney General of the United States has to be more than a follower. He needs to be a leader, and his advocacy needs to move the nation forward in the active pursuit of justice, and that is equal justice under law. I know something about the position of Attorney General because I served as United States Attorney in Connecticut for 4.5 years, the chief federal prosecutor in the Department of Justice for our state. And I served for 20 years as our state's Attorney General, litigating alongside and in opposition to the Department of Justice. And I feel especially strongly about this office. It is not just another government lawyer. It is not just another cabinet secretary. It is the nation's lawyer and legal conscience, especially when it comes to protecting civil rights and civil liberties. Senator Sessions has failed to demonstrate that he will be that vigorous, zealous advocate in protecting civil rights and liberties. He has demonstrated hostility and antipathy, even outright opposition to voting rights, women's health care and privacy rights, religious freedom rights. He has staunchly opposed immigration reform and criminal justice reform that implicate constitutional values and civil rights. And he has opposed hate crimes legislation, the Violence Against Women Act, a number of measures that help to guarantee and protect civil rights in America today. This point is especially important because those rights are increasingly threatened, not just from outside this country, but from forces within it. And the Attorney General needs to be a public official who will speak truth to power and provide an independent voice, assuring that the President of the United States is never above the law. He must speak truth to power and tell the President what he cannot do. Senator Sessions has failed to demonstrate that he will provide that independent voice and assure that the President of the United States completely adheres to the law when it comes to conflicts of interest or controversies, and we are encountering an administration that seems to be prone to those conflicts of interest in unprecedented scope and scale. On voting rights, Senator Sessions said about Shelby County versus Holder that it was good news, even though it gutted an essential enforcement provision of the Voting Rights Act. When 250,000 citizens in his state were denied photo identifications necessary to vote because Department of Motor Vehicles offices were closed, he did nothing. In effect, no comment. His antipathy and hostility to that vigorous advocacy as a champion, not a bystander, not a passive follower of the law, but as a zealous advocate, is lacking. And that is one of the key reasons that lack of commitment, ironclad commitment to civil rights is one of the reasons that I have said that I will oppose his nomination. And I want to introduce now Senator Hirono to be followed by Senator Duckworth and Senator Cortez Masto.
Waiver, I ordinarily would agree that he should wait his time, but in this case, I think it's.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal, and aloha to all of you. I've served with Senator Jeff Sessions throughout my time in the Senate, and I respect him as a colleague. But I have deep concerns about how Senator Sessions would use his prosecutorial discretion as Attorney General to address a number of critical issues. During his confirmation hearing, I pressed Senator Sessions for a commitment to vigorously protect every citizen's right to vote, particularly with regard to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which safeguards Americans from discriminatory voting laws. He did not give me a satisfactory answer that he would scrutinize states' voting laws for discriminatory effect. I also asked Senator Sessions whether he would honor the Department of Justice's consent decrees that address police misconduct and enhance accountability. Senator Sessions did not adequately assure me that his department would uphold these agreements without revisiting or renegotiating these agreements. I pressed Senator Sessions for a commitment to defend Roe v. Wade in federal court and to enforce laws that guarantee the constitutionally protected right for a woman to choose. But Senator Sessions did not disavow his past comments that Roe v. Wade was one of the worst Supreme Court decisions ever made, and he does not acknowledge that that decision has a constitutional basis. Should the Supreme Court be presented with a case that gives them the opportunity to overturn Roe v. Wade, I asked Senator Sessions what he would direct his Solicitor General to do, whether he would direct the Solicitor General to go in and argue for overturning Roe v. Wade. He said that was a hypothetical and that he would not be responding. That was not reassuring to me at all. Over the past 2 months, I've heard from hundreds of my constituents and a number of prominent civil rights organizations, including a number of them who testified yesterday before the Judiciary Committee. After all of this, I will vote against the nomination of Jeff Sessions to serve as our Attorney General. I am deeply concerned about how he would use his prosecutorial discretion to uphold voting rights, protect civil rights, and protect a woman's right to choose. Now we turn to Senator Tammy Duckworth. What's good for you?
Right here is good. Thank you, Senator Hirono. Thank you for being here. As an American living with disabilities, my life isn't like many of my colleagues in Congress. Getting around can be difficult. You saw what I had to do to get into this room today. I can't always get into restaurants or other public spaces, and I have to spend a lot of time planning on how to get from one place to another. And I understand that not everyone thinks about these things, and for most of my adult life, I didn't either. But after I became injured in combat during my service in Iraq, I learned how important the protections of laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act are to ensuring millions of Americans with disabilities can live and thrive with dignity. Without them, Americans like me wouldn't be able to get to work, go to school, hold a job, pay taxes, go shopping, or do any of the things people take for granted. And that's why I'm speaking out today, because it matters deeply to me who the Attorney General of the United States is. The Attorney General is charged with protecting disability rights and deciding whether to enforce or erode the protections countless Americans depend on. In the critical areas of healthcare, education, employment, voting, and others. And we have a nominee who has a record of speaking up against disability issues. He's called the protections for people with disabilities, and I quote, unnecessary and even, and I quote, dangerous. He called laws requiring public schools to accommodate students with disabilities, and I quote, the single most irritating problem for teachers throughout America today. He voted against expanding hate crime protections to people with disabilities. The hate crime against an 18-year-old man with disabilities recently in Chicago should remind us that hate is not limited to any skin color, and that civil rights laws, from hate crimes to voting rights to disability rights, protects us all. I'm speaking up because I think it's important for Americans to understand that disability rights is a civil rights issue, and it's an issue that my lawyer, the Attorney General of the United States, should be committed to advancing. And if Senator Sessions is confirmed, I am deeply concerned about what will happen to citizens with disabilities, to citizens with different racial backgrounds, to citizens with different sexual orientations, and to other marginalized Americans. Thank you for coming here today. And I will now be joined by my
Four
colleague.
Democratic senators just announcing their opposition to the confirmation of Senator Jeff Sessions to become the nation's next Attorney General. It still looks like an uphill struggle, though, for Democrats. The Republicans have the majority in the United States Senate. We're watching that. Two of the most important jobs in the new administration, or at least in the world, are front and center behind us up on Capitol Hill right now as the U.S. Senate takes up the nominations of retired Marine Corps General James Mattis